Hello, folks. Hello, everybody. Oh my gosh, this is wonderful. Thank you all for being here. And I just want to. Oh, sorry. I'm going to put this back down because I am too loud and boisterous for my own good. I just want to thank CXC for bringing Rupert Kinnard out here. This is an incredible opportunity. And for having us all participate. So just a little, we're going to get into we're going to do a dramatic reading first, and then we'll get into an interview with Rupert, and then open it up to Q&A at the end. So please feel free to start thinking of some questions, some probing questions. But just to give a really brief intro, Rupert Kinnard created the first continuing queer black characters in comics with the Brown Bomber in 1977 and Diva Touché Flambé in 1984 in the pages of Cathartic Comics. He's an inspiration and a role model and a pioneer, and so it's an incredible opportunity that we have him here. So thank you again, Rupert, for being here. Yes. We're going to start off with a reading. So if you want to start clicking through, we will begin.
Well, first of all, hopefully the reading won't be a dramatic reading. It'll be somewhat humorous. I've come to realize fairly recently that I've created and had published hundreds of cartoon strips, and there are a number of them that are my favorite. Content-wise, there are a number of them that are my favorite because of the particular drawings of those strips. This strip happened later in my career. In fact, it's from 1996, which was the year of my accident. The year of my accident, which was the start of my ending, my kind of career as drawing comics. So I don't really particularly care that much for the drawings in this strip, but this strip really, to me, represents the most of what I've tried to include in my comic strips.
Oh.
With the celebration of Black History Month, I'm sure you, as an African-American gay male, are really examining the discrimination that you face because of your race, much more than your sexual orientation, right?
No way! I bet you're still overwhelmed by the hardships that you face as a gay man, which must be much worse than anything you experience as a black man.
He's wrong. People are much more racially insensitive to you as a person of color, huh?
The next slide.
Oh.
No, actually, wait.
This is so complicated. He's wrong. People are much more racially insensitive to you as a person of color, huh?
He doesn't know what he's talking about. Homophobia is your biggest cross to bear, isn't it?
Before I can address this issue with you both, would you please not use me as your footrest? This next strip was one of the first strips I drew in college. The Brown Bomber first appeared in publication when I attended Cornell College. So the next strip is from probably like 1977. And the idea behind the strip is that Cornell College was an average school with an average curriculum. But at one point, they decided to change from having a number of classes each semester to having one class every 3.5 weeks. So it's a kind of a drastic change in the program. So students had to struggle to, understand how they were going to adapt to it.
It just seems to me that professors consider these blocks to be the perfect opportunity to try and cram as much knowledge into our heads as possible within a 3.5-week period. They like to label it concentrated learning.
What's even more amazing, some people think this idea is a success. It might seem that way to them, but most people I know are really having problems and their minds are snapping all over the place.
Well,
okay, sorry.
Well, at least the guy who draws his comic has kept his mind together.
Oops, I wouldn't count on that. Let's see. I had left Cornell, moved to Portland, Oregon, then moved to the Bay Area. And I started including more characters into the strip. Diva Touché Flambé was really born and created in Portland in 1984. And later on, I introduced these two characters to the strip.
Hello, my name is Ray Sadia, and this is my lovely wife, Quesadilla.
As new supporting characters for this strip, we're looking forward to wallowing in the media's love affair with smug, white, hetero-Republican yuppies.
Which also renders other more diverse communities invisible.
Would you happen to know where we could find the stars of this strip, our new role models?
Well, you found us. I'm the Brown Bomber, a black, poor, radical fairy superhero.
I am Diva Touché Flambé, a reincarnated, black, vegetarian, leftist, lesbian educator.
This is what is commonly referred to as the reaction panel.
This is not exactly meant to be a 30-something of comic strips, is it?
No, you may come to know it more as the Twilight Zone.
Next strip. In this strip, there's a reference to an organization that's called the OCA, and that was the Oregon Citizens Alliance, and they were very anti-queer people.
That's not in the comic, that was a reaction. Yes, of course I understand your frustrations. We can't help but notice the transitions going on around us. As people pass away, others are being born. Some are making the decision to move away from this area as others are arriving every day, and the OCA continues to perpetuate ignorance.
How can we embrace the carefree joys of being two-dimensional characters if we're constantly affected by our author's drastic life changes?
I know what you mean. Any transition that steers us towards being Doonesbury-like is very strange indeed.
So lately, I find myself really stressed out with the demands of being a role model for young people. I'm constantly wondering, what can I do about the desperate need for more African-American heroes in the media?
Of course, I shudder to think we'd ever be that desperate.
I'm sure even you can understand how irritating it is to hear Spike Lee referred to as the Black Woody Allen. I've also heard Lionel Richie referred to as the Black Barry Manilow and Whitney Houston as the Black Diana Ross. Reaction panel.
Someone told you, I think, of you as the Black Pillsbury Doughboy, didn't they?
This is a concept I came up with probably in the early 80s, and I couldn't use it because I kept thinking people are just going to think I'm promoting violence. But it was during the Reagan administration that I decided I have to use this concept.
I say be violent. Anyway. Slapthology, Jesus. The action-based science or method of addressing mental abnormalities, perception disorders, and or other forms of bad-mindedness through the ancient technique of slapping as therapy to promote clear thinking.
I just don't understand your obsession with Black History Month. We're your parents and we're white. You're white. What about white history? Come closer and I'll explain my views to you. In 1987, the first Black lesbian character of a somewhat syndicated comic strip introduced a form of therapy that promotes queer thinking for socially impaired. A little closer, please. Wow! My mind feels as fresh as a breath mint. I guess most written history has centered around the accomplishments of white people. In honor of Diva Touché Flambé, queer thinking brought to you by a healthy dose of Slapthology.
That's the end of the readings.
Thank you to all the readers. So yeah, so I wanted to find out about some of your secret origins and the secret origins of your characters. So you talk about some characters that you made back in high school and sort of during your journey of self-discovery, including Superbad. So can you explain the origin of Superbad and who is this character?
Well, I became known in my neighborhood as someone who could draw superheroes, and this was in grade school, actually, probably in 8th grade. And I was buying a lot of superhero comics, and I eventually I was able to draw Superman and Batman and a number of those superheroes well enough that I became kind of known in the neighborhood as someone who could draw them. At one point, I really wanted to create my own superheroes, and I started doing that. It was really upon learning more and more about Muhammad Ali and James Baldwin and getting more into their life's work and a lot of their beliefs that I feel as if I became a bit radicalized. And I realized that all of these superheroes that I had created were white. And I became pretty angry. And so I wanted to create a superhero that reflected that. So I created the Superbad at the time. And I always describe him, as I did in the film, No Straight Lines, as having an afro big enough to scare all white people. And so I really, it was great because I drew little adventures involving Superbad in my sketchbooks. And I did that for quite a while and really enjoyed doing it.
And this is around the same time that sort of early stages of blaxploitation films were coming out as well, right? So like Sweetback's Badass Song and Shaft, and there seems to be some sort of visual reference here. Did you think of also that Superbad as sort of along the lines of what was happening in blaxploitation films?
I think I probably would have been influenced by it, but I wasn't conscious of it. But I did. I mean, I really remember the effects of those movies on my, community, because we never saw ourselves reflected in films at that time, especially as heroes.
And having agency of any kind.
Right.
And your comics were starting to do that. So you were interested in Muhammad Ali, and you talked about that. I'm curious about how you were introduced to Muhammad Ali and James Baldwin, but then later on, Joe Louis became a fascination for you.
Well, I kind of believe in that philosophy of, if you're part of an oppressed group and you've been told that you're less than human, one of the ways to offset that is to go to the other end of the spectrum and say, black is beautiful. We're better off because we're black, because of we have soul, that kind of thing. So with learning bit by bit about Joe Louis and what he was the hero he was to the African American community in the 30s and 40s, I really decided I wanted to create a superhero that was kinder and gentler. And I really wanted to accept the challenge of having a nonviolent superhero, because that would make the superhero I create would have to be really resourceful in how he dealt with crime fighting. And so in one of my sketchbooks, I just kept simply trying to draw a character that appealed to me. And I really wanted him to be down to earth, wanted him to have sneakers that, and decided he would wear a bed sheet around his neck. And I just wanted him to be as unique as possible. Around that time, I was also really affected by the teachings of Martin Luther King. So between the persona of Joe Louis and Martin Luther King, I really knew I wanted the superhero to be kind of, a little more meek.
Yeah, yeah.
And so Joe Lewis's nickname was the Brown Bomber. And I always acknowledged that. And so it really, in a way, to honor him, I called the character the Brown Bomber and became obsessed in terms of drawing little adventures in my sketchbooks and just drawing his figure every time I doodled. And honestly, I never ever expected the character to go beyond the pages of my sketchbook.
Right. I noticed that the character also has like one boxing glove and one free hand. Why did you decide on that?
Well, when I first drew him, being influenced by Joe Louis, he immediately had two boxing gloves, and I at one point I thought, oh God, one boxing glove would be cooler than having two. And in my demented mind, I feel like at some point Michael Jackson must have come across an image of the Brown Bomber with one glove and decided, well, one glove, sequin glove for me would work.
He also, I mean, and this comes out later when you establish his origins more, like he like hiccups and then he sort of transforms into more of a superheroic version of himself. But there's a sort of like gray zone of where he, how superheroic he is, because he still always has the bed sheet and like he doesn't turn into a full superhero costume.
Well, the thing is, I never had aspirations for the Brown Bomber to be a comic book.
Yeah.
I always knew he would be a character. So the idea that I wanted him to be as original as possible made me want to take aspects of my life and apply it to the Brown Bomber. So the fact that my favorite dessert, I love sweet potato pies. And I thought, oh, I'll have the Brown Bomber love sweet potato pies. And then I went even beyond that. I thought, what if it's his weakness? What if he's battling crime and all of a sudden he smells sweet potato pie? So
it's better than kryptonite.
Right,
yeah, for sure.
Right. So in theory, what would happen is if he was battling a supervillain, he smells sweet potato pie, he'd have to find out where it is and gobble it up before returning to, his crime fighting. So there were a number of things that I used to really try to make him unique. And one, really the fact that I never saw him as a superhero in a comic book, I never really developed his origin story.
Right.
And even now, it's spotted. But one of the other things, I really love the idea of the Brown Bomber having a secret identity, but he couldn't control turning into the Brown Bomber. The only way he could turn into the Brown Bomber is if he hiccuped. He would hiccup, there would be this explosion and the smell of chocolate in the air. And it would be the Brown Bomber. Yeah. And even as the Brown Bomber, he wouldn't be that much in control of getting back to his secret identity.
Yeah. But there's also, superhero, I think of the superhero genre as really something that's more dramatic and not humorous. And so you were taking these, characters, or a character that was supposed to a superhero that's supposed to be part of a more dramatic setting and putting him into humorous situations.
Well, that might lead into this next part in terms of it was when I was accepted into Cornell College in 1976. And as I said, I was really satisfied and content to draw the Brown Bomber's adventures in my sketchbooks. Right. But it was really great. In school, the school newspaper, the editors wanted to know if I wanted to do an editorial cartoon strip. And I thought, well, that would be cool. And I knew it was just going to be a one-panel cartoon. And I knew that the cartoon would feature things that happened on campus. But it really was kind of a stretch for me to decide, if I can incorporate this character I really love in my sketchbooks on this editorial page, that would be a really great way to share, my love of the character. So it ended up being that the Brown Bomber would comment on, things that happened on campus.
You talked about him ended up being almost like a mascot for the school.
Yeah, it got to that point because he ran in the school newspaper for about 3 years. And at one point, the black students wanted to establish a scholarship fund for incoming black students. So what we did to raise money was we decided, well, let's try to print up Brown Bomber T-shirts, because at that point he had become like a mascot. And I didn't know what to expect, but we had 300 T-shirts printed, and all 300 of them were sold. And they were sold to students, administrators, and faculty members.
Do you still have one?
I do. I have a couple. They're very, very rare.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like a museum piece, actually. I don't know.
And the thing is, that was my senior year, and I always had the Brown Bomber in the strip. The first strips were single panel strips, and I really realized I can't get the hang of this. So I changed it to a 4-panel strip, and I felt like that was more, within my wheelhouse.
But this strip is 2 tiers. It's how many panels? I mean,
well, this is very special.
Yeah.
Because the point is, towards the end of my senior year, the Brown Bomber had commented on so many issues having to do with, Cornell put on a production of Boys in the Band, which is a classic gay play. And there was a, campus reaction in such a way that, the Brown Bomber commented on it. He would talk about how women were treated on campus, and just a whole range of subjects. But towards the end of my school year, I decided, or my years at Cornell, I decided, even though the Brown Bomber has been a champion for all these rights, he had never proclaimed to be a gay character.
Right.
So within the last couple of weeks of my senior year, I drew comics that had the Brown Bomber coming out of the closet, and this is like the last strip of his coming out. So the first week, it was just 4 panels. The second week, it was 4 panels. And so the third week, it really was like this bigger occasion, which I really love in retrospect, because I think when the students opened the paper to the editorial page, and they saw, a larger strip, I think it probably drew their attention a little more.
It also interests me that, he's sitting in the closet at this point, and he bursts out in this sort of moment of liberation, and then, but then the immediate reaction is terrible. I mean, the students seem to be, calling him out, and then he sort of retreats back, and then it becomes a dream in which he says, "Oh, Cornell students wouldn't react this way." There's this sort of, whiplash sort of effect, right?
Yeah, there was something about, one of the things once again in retrospect, when I look back, this strip was in 1979 when it was published, and it was on a college campus. The concept of coming out of the closet was still relatively new at that time.
It's probably illegal in a lot of places.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was really wonderful for me years later to realize that it easily could have been the first time a number of people on that campus had been exposed to the whole concept of not only coming out, but the concept of coming out of a closet.
So what was the reaction on campus? Did you get any pushback from the editors of the Cornellian paper, or anything from the other students?
I definitely didn't get any feedback from the editors of the paper, because we were almost like comrades. We were really... We were very aware of what we were putting in the paper, so we were all on the same page. Campus-wise, one of the interesting reactions were the number of black students that came to me and said, you're not coming out of the club, you're not gay, are you? I said, no, I've been gay ever since I've been here at Cornell.
How long?
But at that time, at that time, I believed in living my life as a gay person.
Yeah.
And I didn't, if you came to my dorm room, you'd see, enough signs that I am.
Gay shit.
But I never felt that need to, individually go up to people and come out as being gay. And you have to understand, I actually graduated from high school in '73. And I took, and lived on my own for 2 years before I went to Cornell. So I felt pretty established in, my own way of living my life.
And this was in Chicago, right?
Right. I grew up in Chicago.
And what was your interaction with the gay scene in Chicago? Did it sort of help, create your identity as an out gay man?
It did. One of the things that comes to mind when I was coming out, well, once again, I was one of those 4-star gays, and that would be gay people who have never been with the opposite sex. So there was just this whole, period of my young life where I just kind of slowly realized it, and I never went through anything traumatic. I never shared it with my family because I felt very much a loner within my family, and everyone was fine with that. I was fine with it, and so were they. So one of the things I remember about coming out, or really becoming more involved in the queer community, was the discrimination that was happening. I'd be part of a group of black men going to a gay club, and you could see 6 people just flowing into the club, and then when they got to us, it would classically be, "Let me see your ID, all 5 of you. I need to see your ID." So fairly early on, I have to say I didn't have this image of gay men specifically as being ultra sensitive or so much of the way I saw white gay men presenting themselves in the media, and all of these publications that were supposed to be supportive of gay people didn't have people of color or women in them. So that was really the basis, I think, of my comic strip being political, especially when it ran in queer publications.
Were you seeing other queer comics during this time period? Were you seeing some of the gay newspapers and seeing the works of, Alison Bechdel, or actually that would have been earlier. That would have been too early, yeah. So, but did you see any, maybe the strips that would have run in The Advocate, was it the Stonewall Chronicles?
Right. The Advocate, when they ran Howard Cruz's strip, he was probably one of the first gay cartoonists I saw. I really liked Howard Hughes's work a lot because I was familiar with Robert Crumb's work. And I thought it was interesting how similar they were.
Yeah, but telling very different kinds of stories.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So the comic strip, were you reading a lot of comics during this time period that you decided to, with Cornell offering you this strip, that you were sort of ready to launch into the forum? Or was this something that was sort of a surprise to you that you were going to make a comic strip?
Oh, it's total surprise. Because once again, I didn't think any of those comics or that character would see the light of day beyond the book. So, and it was my decision. It was really cool because they knew I could draw.
Right.
And even before the comic strip ran, I would illustrate different articles and cover, different covers. So they knew I was a cartoonist.
Right.
So they just wanted me to do anything. Yeah. And I decided, wow, this would be a good way to share the Brown Bomber with folks.
So you ended up moving to San Francisco and being working with the San Francisco Weekly, and this was a big sort of moment in your life, right? In terms of creatively and in terms of community. And how did you bring the Brown Bomber with you?
Well, when I moved to Portland, I really thought that was the end of the strip because to me the strip ran in my school newspaper, and that was that. But I became involved with doing illustrations for one queer newspaper there, and I think I may have shared, some of when I was sharing my illustrations. A number of those included those Brown Bomber strips. They wanted me to run the strip there, and it was really cool because it was in a gay paper. So then the strip itself. The focus became what was going on in the queer community in Portland at that time.
So Portland was the first place that Brown Bomber.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. And then San Francisco happened after that.
Right.
Okay.
And what happened in Portland was the strip was still called the Brown Bomber. And then I hooked up with this a woman who's a great friend of mine now, Renee LaChance, and a dear friend of hers, Jay Brown. And they were working for a queer newspaper in Portland that was published by a white gay man, and he would really cater to the bar scenes and would never have people of color writing or being a part of the paper. I don't think it was conscious, but it's just the way it turned out. And people of color weren't represented in the paper. And Renee and Jay were really frustrated that the paper wasn't more diverse. Yeah. So I was a known art director at that time, and they came to me and they wanted to know if I wanted to help them design a new paper for Portland. And I laughed, saying, there's no way you're going to dethrone the this other newspaper. But they came to me with a printing date, and we pulled the first issue together, and it became the biggest queer newspaper in Oregon. And they wanted to run the Brown Bomber, and I think I ran one Brown Bomber strip in that paper before I decided it can't just be the Brown Bomber. He needs to have a equal partner. Yes. And I really wanted it to be, a lesbian. Yes. So that's how the Diva Touché Flambé was born, and with the two of them, the comic strip. The name of the comic strip was changed to Cathartic Comics. Okay, yeah. So, and the Cathartic Comics was then collected in this collection here. That was published in 1992, and it was one of the highlights of my life to have that book published. It's a beautiful, beautiful collection. Who was the publisher? Allison Press. Oh, yeah. Allison Publications. Yeah. It's a shame that we sort of lost a lot of the queer publishers over time, but they did such incredible work reprinting a lot of this material. Yeah. So here's the main characters here, Brown Bomber and Diva Touché Flambé. As you said, you sort of, their origins aren't exactly like solidified, but like they have these sort of, and here are the, okay. This not seems to be, there it is, okay. Sorry. Come on. There we go. Their origins don't seem to be solidified. I'm sorry, this is... Okay.
You might be better off just clicking on the computer.
Okay, there we go. And no, we're not going to go there. Okay, so these, we're not going there. But these characters, like, they become more solidified over time, but you resist sort of giving them specific origins, and there it is. There's some origins. Right. It's magic. So when did you create these strips that tried to give them sort of superhero secret origins?
I think it actually, when I moved to the Bay Area, the strip ended up running in a general alternative weekly newspaper. So that was the biggest audience that I had at that point. And so I felt compelled to give some kind of backstory. But everything about really the way I did it was a little sloppy. Because the very next year I would do another origin story, and every time I felt like I was influenced by some guy who came into my life, important people, I would change the Brown Bomber's origin name. Nice. And then this one mentor I had back when I was younger in Chicago. He passed away, so I wanted to honor him by including his name in the. So it got kind of dicey there for a while.
So with Diva, like what was the inspiration for her? Like how did you? I mean, I know that you wanted to have a sort of equal partner to the character of Brown Bomber, but where did she sort of come from in your mind?
Well, Diva absolutely came from my relationships with the various women in my life. And I always knew that so many of the women I knew and really admired and respected, they had this quality to them that I thought would really play off the Brown Bomber. And it kind of relates to my general feeling about men. I don't think boys ever really grow into men. They always retain, to being boys. And I think even girls are born to be women. As soon as they're girls, they're like little women. Men are never, little men. They're like boys and then big boys. And so there was just so much about how I felt about the wisdom that the women in my life had. I mean, I have this grandmother, 10 minutes, this grandmother who was the very first person who shared that phrase that we all love, bless his heart.
Bless his.
And I just thought that was so representative of a kind of understanding and a compassion and an acknowledgement that you will never step outside of being a boy.
Yeah, right.
I mean, the whole idea of my mother saying, make your bed, and you can't wait to get outside, and you go and make the bed really quickly. And my grandmother would look and say, bless his heart, he did what he had to do to just... But there's so much that's in my heart concerning Diva as one of the characters, so I love her.
So I wanted to also ask about your relationship with the sort of queer comics community. I mean, you did this this cartoon jam with Jennifer Camper, Howard Cruz, Diana Massa, Alison Bechdel, Ivan Velez. I mean, these sort of things are really wonderful to see. What was that like to have your strip sort of bring you into a community of other cartoonists?
It was great. I admired them so much. When I was called and invited to be a part of what's called a cartoon jam, it was all of these cartoonists that I really admired, and it just ended up being so much fun. And I loved faking outrage of what they had my heroes do.
Yeah.
All of a sudden they're involved
untoward
in
acts.
Right.
And then you had your accident, and the comics community sort of reacted to this.
Yeah, my accident happened in 1996, and I was in Mississippi for my grandmother's funeral. And the day after her funeral, I was on this two-lane road, and a car was coming in the opposite direction, seeming like it was veering into my lane. And so the rental car I was in went off the road into a ditch. And it was obviously trying times, but as I was recovering and I made it back to the job I had, I got in the mail this box, and I opened it, and the box was from Alison Bechdel, and she had heard about my accident, and she contacted a number of artists around the country, wanting to know if they wanted to be a part of simply a get well card. And then it turned into this long string of cards, which I don't know if we can unfurl. But, oh, thanks, Zach.
Would Athena's guardians please meet her on the first floor of the circulation desk? Thank you.
Oh.
Yes. So there's some amazing people on this. Here's Jennifer Camper. Thank you. You're the expert at this. Leanne
It's really
Franson,
rare.
Keith Knight,
It's really
Alison
rare
Bechdel.
that I bring this string of cards with me, but I thought on the occasion of this conference, it was really important to bring it because this is such a celebration of the community that we're a part of. And this is just obviously one of the greatest gifts I've ever gotten. And I don't think Allison or these cartoonists really would understand that at that time when I'm going into this whole new, chapter of my life, how this so distracted me from this, new way that I had to live in my body. So this is very important to me, and I'm really glad to have the opportunity to share it with you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a couple of minutes left.
5 minutes.
We have 5 minutes left. We're going to open it up to a couple questions, but I did want to ask one final thing. Your work has now been the work you were doing initially was very marginalized in the sense that it wasn't run in the sort of mainstream of American comics. And now things have shifted, and we see a lot more queer representation, African American representation in comics, and a lot of people that look to you as a role model and a pioneer and inspiration. So how do you feel about that? That must be an interesting thing to grapple with.
There's not one time that someone hasn't come up to me and has mentioned those who have mentioned the impact the comic strip had on them. It's shocking to me because I know there's a general world of cartoons, and then I was around when there was like the creation of underground comics. Mm-hmm. And I've always considered Cathartic Comics like sub-underground.
Yeah.
And so it's very genuine when someone comes up to me with a copy of the book or someone says, "Oh, I saw your work at a certain period of my life." I mean, there's this one particular Lawrence Lindell, this one African American cartoonist, and he was like angry. He was saying, "Why is it I didn't have this as some kind of roadmap to what I can do?" So every time it's happened, I've been just incredibly honored.
He's created a series of awards based on your name,
Yeah, see? I'm brazen enough to have brought the award.
All right. Well, we have time for a question or two. So yeah.
Yeah. So as an up-and-coming cartoonist myself, when it comes to queer representation and Black queer representation in comics, what do you want to see more of from this current generation of makers?
Really, what I hope to see more of is definitely happening, and that's every aspect of your life. The whole idea of intersectionality. I mean, I remember going to a cartoonist conference, queer cartoonist conference, and there were like gay cartoonists of color who were struggling with being bipolar. And when you can take those parts of your life and incorporate it into your work, share your experiences with other people, I think that's what makes your work really unique. And I have such a vivid memory of what it was like when I was younger and I wanted to create superheroes, and I was creating white superheroes because that's all I saw. So we're living in a day now where you see so much that I think so many younger people are just more open to expressing themselves within their work.
May I have your attention, please? If Sean Watkins is in the library, please come to the third floor reference desk.
Okay, Sean.
Again, if Sean Watkins is in the library, please come to the third floor reference desk. Thank you.
You had said that when you were at Cornell, you didn't imagine that the brown bomber would go on to have this further life. And I'm intrigued by the trajectory of all that, but it seemed like it started with your own personal obsession with Joe Louis. And I'm just really curious, have you seen this in yourself and other people and where their work goes? What do you, is obsession, like a personal obsession, is that the seed that starts everything? And how do you see that in your creative process?
I think it can be. I would certainly say in my career, there's been a number of people who have sparked me, and I become just fascinated by what they've been able to accomplish and the way they express themselves. I'll tell you just quickly, when Alison Bechdel was simply doing Dykes to Watch Out For, she hadn't even done Fun Home. She had this popularity surrounding her strip that resulted in her being able to sell refrigerator magnets. And for me, that became the pinnacle of what I wanted. And so with this Kickstarter, the Kickstarter campaign I did, one of the perks, if you signed up to get a book, was Brown Bomber and Diva refrigerator magnets. I'm like, well, okay, there's nothing. That was the pinnacle, and of course, until I got here. So.
Let's see, one more question. Yes.
So I was curious, you are restarting Cathartic Comics, and I don't know the details. I'm curious, are you going to be publishing any of the Cornell strips?
Yes.
Okay.
The Cornell strips, it's really hard to even explain how when you do certain things, you put them away and you don't think they'll ever see the light of day. In the first collection of Cathartic Comics that were published, those were strips that had been published around a certain period of time. So with this new book, Oops, I Just Catharted, one of the greatest things about it is that I'm able to go back to those Cornell strips because I really wanted people to get a sense of the career and the evolution of that strip. Many of those strips that I never thought would ever be published, they had been published in the paper and that was it. They're going to be a part of the book. And the book is going to be hardcover, like 280 pages, and it will be a history of the strip along with a collection of the strip. And I couldn't be prouder to have that published.
If anybody missed the Kickstarter, is there a way for them to get the book in the future? If they missed out on the Kickstarter?
Oh, yes. Well, since the Kickstarter campaign is over, it's now in the hands of the publisher, so people can pre-order from the publisher, which is really good because I knew a number of people who had issues with trying to navigate Kickstarter. Sure. So this is a more direct way of being able to
And the
get
publisher is who?
Stacked Deck Press.
And how can they do that?
For more information,
Well played.
available right here, and just outside. QR code,
There you go.
ban away.
So now you're indulging in my grandson's desire to be Vanna White.
They're there. Well, thank you very much.
I just want to thank specifically, there's tons of people to thank, but Jenny and Caitlin, just working with them and being the introduction for me to this institution is amazing. I couldn't have been here without my partner, Scott. And I won't say any more about him because if I do, I get emotional because he's just an amazing partner. And my godson, Zach, showed up today from Denver, surprising me. So I am all surprised out. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you,
again.
guys.
Thank you.